Let's take a look at package.json. So we've worked with dev, but we did not look at what build does. Let's give that a try. So clear pnpm build, and notice that it had built the application and it created a folder here called dist. And this is basically like whatever is in this folder, it's the actual thing that we would want to put somewhere on a server so that other people can work with our application. And if you look at it, you're going to realize that it doesn't look exactly like what you wrote. And that's, the Vite is doing its magic under the hood. It kind of puts the actual dependencies that you need together, and look at, there's a lot of stuff here in the CSS that you don't really see it. You just did this import, right? So it puts all the right things together and minify these files and prepare them. And if you want to actually run what was built locally, then you would do pnpm preview. So pnpm preview, it runs still a local server, but it runs your build application. So let's go and maybe drop that here. And so it looks correct. And that's helpful sometimes, to just give it a try and see if the build actually works the same as your development server. So if this build artifact is on our computer, it's not going to be helpful. We got to put it somewhere on the internet so then other people can use our application. And so far, the way we've been doing that was through GitHub Pages. All right, so we have GitHub Pages, and for most of simple applications, you can use GitHub Pages to do this. And I've shown you in previous projects how you can do that. We're going to be using something similar for this app, but in a slightly different way compared to the previous applications. So if I'm gonna try to find like an example of one of the earlier applications and open it up for us so we can take a look at the differences, right? And so for instance, let's take a look at the wake up times app. So this is not important. This is the deployed app. This is our wake up times app. And the way this works is very simple. It just goes, in the master repo, it just goes and considers whatever you have here, that is the final product. And it automatically basically uses the index.html as an entry point to the application. And so for a very simple app like this, where we didn't have a build step involved, this just works by, we just needed to go to the settings, go to the pages, and just say deploy from a branch, give it like the particular branch, and say like the app is at the root, and that would be it. In this particular case, there are a few different ways that we can go about deploying our application. One would be including the dist inside the repository. So you would need to take the dist out of the git ignore and make sure that you push it into the repository. And then here, instead of deploying at the root, you would have to choose the subfolder to do this. Now that's not a strategy that you would want to use. A better strategy is to allow GitHub to actually build the app from your source code and then deploy the built artifact. And GitHub these days supports this process, and it does it through a feature called actions. So let's go and see GitHub actions. So GitHub actions, it allows you to create different workflows, and you can do a whole lot with GitHub actions. I'm just going to show you a very simple example of it, and kind of keeping in mind that we're not really here to learn about GitHub actions. You shouldn't expect yourself, and I certainly don't have this expectation that you can reproduce this from scratch and you can remember the syntax that we are using here. In all the projects that you're going to see in this course, I'm going to give you whatever you need for your GitHub action to work. But that is the strategy that we're going to be continuing using moving forward in the course. So let me show you how this is going to work for us moving forward. I'm going to be creating a folder here in the source code, and this folder is going to be called dot with the leading .github. This folder, we need to include it in our Git repo, and so this will go to the GitHub repository. And inside this, GitHub has a lot of different things going on for it, and it uses basically this folder for all sorts of configuration settings, templates, and things like that. One of the things that it lets you do is to create these so-called workflows. So you got to go here and create a subdirectory in it called workflows, and then inside that we're going to need to create what is known as a configuration file in a YAML format. And it doesn't matter what we call it, but you probably want to give it a name that is descriptive of what it does. So deploy.yml for YAML is a good one. And YAML is a very lightweight, maybe I can bring that up for you too, YAML. So there you go. YAML is a very lightweight markup language that allows you to create configuration files, among other things. So we're going to go here, and here I'm going to copy from the lecture notes the script that I have, well, the YAML file that I have, and sort of briefly go over it. It is not our goal to understand everything that is going on in here, but you can always consult the documentation here to understand, like writing workflows, for example, right? So what I'm writing here, it follows the specification that GitHub expects. And if you ever find yourself in need of like modifying this, you can come and consult the documentation. But the gist of it is something like this. It says run this workflow when something happens. So there's usually a trigger to start the workflow. And in this case, I'm saying whenever I push some new code to, like in this case is my master branch, this is the main branch that I have, then start running this workflow. So the nice thing about it is that like when you write your application, when you write your source code and you're happy with it and you just push it to GitHub, it just takes it away from there. And it gets triggered every time you push it. You can set this to something else, including manual triggers. Then what happens, it kind of goes through a number of steps that's why it's called a workflow. So they're like a sequence of things that it does. It checks out your code from the repository. It installs some of the dependencies. So kind of like what you need to understand what happens is that basically GitHub gives you a little compute environment where there is like a Ubuntu Linux system is running, and you get to like install the things that you need, like node and pnpm, and then you're gonna go just like your local computer, like you run pnpm install in your project to install all the dependencies, then you run pnpm build to actually like build this folder, the dist folder, and then there are like workflows that are created by other people or other companies that allow you to like reuse a set of steps. And so one of them is, for example, this one that I'm using, and this one helps me to upload the dist folder as a artifact for the GitHub pages. And then this part will take care of actually deploying that as a GitHub page. So when you create this in your repository, before you go and like push your code to GitHub, you gotta go and make a few changes on your GitHub repo as well. I'm gonna show you how this looks like on a complete version for this very application. So I think, for example, this one is good. So I have my GitHub workflow in here, and you gotta go to your settings, and then you gotta go to the pages. And so rather than like previously in the pages, you had deploy from a branch. Now, instead of this, you're going to choose GitHub Action, like in here. I selected GitHub Action, right? When you select this and then you push your code to the repository, then it will automatically start what is called an action, right? And this action just follows all the steps that you defined. These are all the steps that I defined here. Right, so all of these steps are basically happening here, and there's sort of like a green check mark next to it says that, you know, it was successful, it went through, and then it went to this part, which is the deploy. And so the deploy was successful as well, and it basically like deployed my app to this URL. And if we like go to that URL, this is the application. Like this is what we're gonna end up building together by the end of this project. But that's how it looks like. And it's not necessary, it's not the only way for this application. And in fact, our app is still fairly simple, but this opens the door for you to create more complex workflows on top of it. This is one of the standard practices in software industry. It's commonly known as CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous development, or continuous deployment. And so one of the most common use cases for GitHub Action is to do CI/CD. And that's what we're doing here.